Lindsey Graham just walked back into the Senate spotlight and wasted no time pulling out his favorite weapon, fear. In a single hearing, he praised the military for hiring on merit, then launched into a history lesson about Hitler, warning that ignoring Iran, Russia, or China today could be a repeat of the 1930s. He demanded generals give him literal percentages on whether nukes would fly, painted every threat as a ticking bomb, and declared diplomacy to be weakness. But is Graham actually sounding an alarm, or is he selling paranoia dressed up as strategy? Because what came next shocked everyone listening. It all started with an easy exchange about military recruitment.
What you're trying to do is hire people based on merit, right?
Yes, sir.
You could care less if they're libertarian, vegetarian, Democrat, Republican, as long as they can do the job?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. More people are joining the military now than any time in recent memory, right?
Yes, sir.
So the situation described by Senator Murray is not being viewed by other Americans because they're signing up in droves.
Senator, there's been a historic surge.
You know why? Because they think you're a winner. They think you're going to lead. They think you're going to have their back. That's why they're signing up. Keep doing what you're doing. Now, do you agree that the world kind of miscalculated Hitler in the 20s and 30s?
Certainly did not understand the scope of the threat. Yes,
Like
Senator.
the guy wrote a book, I want to kill all the Jews, and nobody believed him. You remember that? General Kane, is that a fair statement that the military-industrial complex of the 20s and 30s really didn't miscalculated Hitler?
Yes, sir.
The danger of that is like 50 million people get killed. So let's don't do that now. As to Iran, they say they want to kill all the Jews. Do you agree with them?
I believe they mean what they chant. Yes, Senator.
Do you agree with that, General Kane?
Sir, I think they've got some agendas for sure to
Well, is
advance
that agenda to use a nuclear weapon against Israel?
Sir, I think they would potentially.
They had a nuclear weapon. Would they use it against Israel? In your professional military judgment.
Sir, I think they'd use it to pressure Israel. I don't know whether they would use it.
Well, is it 50-50, 60-40, 70-10? What is
Sir,
it?
I don't know what the percentage is.
Well, you can't be wrong, can you? What does Israel think?
Sir, I think they think they would potentially.
What do you
use
think,
nuclear.
Mr. Secretary? If they had a nuclear weapon, would they use it to wipe out Israel?
I think Israel believes, and quite understandably,
Do you believe that?
That it is an existential
Do
threat
you
to their
believe
existence.
that?
Hold on, and in the hands of the wrong Iranian, a cleric or a radical, that they would seek to
Well,
use
is this a radical cleric that exists there today?
Well, as of
If
right
he's
now,
not,
yes.
who the hell would be? So I'm trying to get everybody to think, let's don't do what we did in the 30s. They're going to use a nuclear weapon if they get it. Are they trying to build a nuclear weapon versus a peaceful nuclear power program, Mr. Secretary? Have the Iranians been trying to build a nuke?
There are plenty of indications that they have been moving their way towards something that would look a lot like a nuclear weapon.
Does China intend to take Taiwan by force if necessary?
We don't believe they've made that decision yet, but certainly if you look at their exercises that they're performing in that area, they
What
look
do you
a lot
think,
like
General
what that would
Kane?
look
Do you
like.
think China is intent on taking Taiwan?
Sir, I think it's not to split hairs, but I think it depends on what you define take. I think if
like take it over.
I think if they could get them their way, for sure. Do I think they're going to use military capability? Maybe, maybe not. Do we need to be prepared for that? Yes.
Okay. Is Putin going to stop in Ukraine?
I don't believe he is, sir. I think he'll
What do you
go
think?
until.
What do you think, Secretary? Is he going to stop?
Remains to be seen, Senator.
Well, he says he's not. You know, this is the 30s all over. It doesn't remain to be seen. He tells everybody around what he wants to do. Are you familiar with his military buildup in terms of armaments? It's well beyond what we need to do to take Ukraine. Listen, I think I like what you're doing. I just think we got to get this stuff right. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon because they'll use it. They're homicidal maniacs who are religious Nazis. China is an expansionist power who will take Taiwan if we don't deter them. Russia will dismember Ukraine and keep going if we don't stop them. Radical Islam, are they still out there, General Kane?
Sir, I think there are still folks that would do America harm.
So is ISIS dead?
No, sir.
Is Al-Qaeda dead?
mostly, and dying more every day.
Yeah, but are they still out there trying to get here?
Yes, sir, to a
So
certain
the
extent.
threat of radical Islam is still real to the American people.
Yes, sir, if allowed to scale. We
Yeah.
work hard to not allow that to happen.
And how you do that, you hit them over there before they come here, right?
So we have a variety of ways, as you know.
It's better to have partners than do it by yourself.
Always, sir, yes.
Okay, so go over just a little bit. The point is, radical Islam is out there. They're trying to get here. Ms. Secretary, if they had a nuclear weapon, would they use it? Would al-Qaeda use a nuclear weapon if they had one?
Senator, a nuclear weapon in the hands of al-Qaeda would be a very bad thing.
Is there a whole lot of difference between a nuclear weapon in the hands of al-Qaeda and the Ayatollah in Iran? I don't think so. They just have a different religious reason to do it. The point is, these budgets are important, but we need to up our game. We need to build more ships because China's building more ships. So we need to hit the enemy before they hit us. We need the ability to project. As to, final thought, as to Russia, China buys and India buys 70% of Russia's oil, Mr. Secretary. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, sir.
If they stop buying cheap Russian oil tomorrow, would that grind Putin's war machine to a halt?
It's a vulnerability. Yes, sir.
We have an ability through legislation to get China and India's attention that if you keep buying cheap Russian oil to empower Putin to kill Ukrainian children, you're going to lose access to our markets. I would urge you and the administration to use that tool to get the attention of China and India. I'll end with this. We're not going to evict every Russian from Ukraine. I'm a practical guy. But we got to end this war so we don't entice China to take Taiwan, and we don't encourage Iran to think we're just all talk and stopping their nuclear ambitions. So you live in very dangerous times. I want to help you. General King, you're the right man at the right time. Thank you.
Senator Reid, and then
Graham gave a rare compliment, praising Secretary Hegseth for making sure the Pentagon was hiring people based on merit, not politics. It didn't matter if someone was Republican, Democrat, vegetarian, or libertarian, so long as they could do the job. He even celebrated the fact that more people were joining the military now than at any point in recent memory. That little detour into optimism, however, didn't last long. The praise was only a warm-up, and the real performance was about to begin. Almost immediately, Graham pivoted from compliments to catastrophe. He reminded everyone how the world miscalculated Hitler in the 1920s and 30s. Hitler, Graham argued, wrote a book where he promised to wipe out the Jews, yet world leaders brushed it off until the horror became undeniable. In Graham's mind, the parallel was obvious. Iran's chants against Israel are the same warning signs ignored before World War II. The implication was chilling. Ignore Iran now, and the price could be catastrophic later. The history lesson sounded less like analysis and more like a setup for the next act. Then came one of Graham's most theatrical moves. He started grilling the generals and the secretary about whether Iran would actually use a nuclear weapon if they got one. He didn't just ask for a general opinion. He wanted numbers, probabilities, percentages, like nuclear war was something you could calculate with Vegas odds. Would it be 50-50, 60-40, 70-10? He demanded clarity that no military official could possibly give. When pressed, they admitted that Iran would at least use such weapons for pressure, but they couldn't predict whether they'd actually launch them. That wasn't good enough for Graham. He wanted certainty, and he wanted it now. To outside observers, the performance wasn't strategy. It was nuclear roulette on live television, with Graham treating speculation as proof. But Graham wasn't done. If Iran was the first domino, then China and Russia were the next two. He asked if China was prepared to take Taiwan by force, as though there were only one simple answer. The generals tried to be measured, suggesting it depended on definitions and circumstances. Maybe they would use force, maybe not. But Graham didn't like nuance. For him, any hesitation was weakness. He painted the scenario in blunt colors. China is expansionist, Russia won't stop in Ukraine, and the world is on the brink of repeating the mistakes of the 1930s. Again, it was the same playbook: invoke Hitler, dismiss ambiguity, and demand action. His frustration with careful answers only grew as he turned the focus back to Putin. The generals said it remained to be seen whether Putin would go beyond Ukraine. Graham scoffed at that. Putin had already announced his goals, he argued. Why wait for proof when the proof was already in plain sight? He criticized the administration for what he called dangerous complacency, treating any reluctance to label threats as absolute certainties as reckless and naive. For Graham, diplomacy wasn't cautious problem-solving, it was appeasement, and appeasement was the road to disaster. Just when it seemed like Graham had enough villains on his stage, he revived another one, radical Islam. He pressed the generals to admit that ISIS wasn't dead, Al-Qaeda wasn't gone, and extremist groups were still trying to strike the United States. To Graham, the threat wasn't abstract, it was immediate and existential. He hammered the same mantra, fight them overseas before they come here. It was a direct callback to post-9/11 policy, but in today's context it sounded like Graham was stacking enemies on top of enemies to justify endless vigilance. The message was clear: no matter the year or the region, America is always under siege, and only bigger budgets and stronger military force can keep the wolves at bay. As he wrapped the hearing, Graham went even broader. He warned that America needed to up its game, build more ships, and expand military projection, because China was outbuilding the U.S. at sea. He said Iran couldn't be allowed to develop nuclear weapons under any circumstance. He scolded China and India for buying Russian oil, insisting that the U.S. should threaten to cut off access to American markets if they kept fueling Putin's war machine. His solution was sweeping: punish adversaries, pressure partners, spend more on defense, and hit enemies before they hit us. But under all the fire and fury, something important was missing. What was the strategy beyond constant escalation? Graham wasn't laying out a plan for diplomacy, or even a nuanced discussion of risk. He was stringing together the greatest hits of fear politics, Hitler analogies, ticking nuclear clocks, existential threats, and warnings of apocalypse. It was less about understanding today's complex global landscape, and more about playing the role of America's alarm bell, ringing louder and louder no matter the circumstance. The striking thing about the performance wasn't just the repetition of history's darkest metaphors. It was the way every issue, recruitment, nuclear weapons, Ukraine, Taiwan, terrorism, oil markets, was filtered through the same lens of urgency and fear. To Graham, the world isn't shades of gray. It's a black and white battlefield, where every hesitation is surrender, and every cautious word is betrayal. That's why he kept demanding yes or no answers to questions that don't have them. He wasn't after clarity, he was after headlines, soundbites that could frame him as the lone voice refusing to underestimate the threat. And maybe that's the real takeaway. Graham isn't trying to convince generals in a Senate room. He's trying to convince the audience outside that America is standing at the edge of another 1930s moment, and only massive military spending and aggressive posturing can prevent disaster. It's an effective narrative because it feeds fear, and fear is one of the most powerful motivators in politics. But it also risks turning complex diplomacy into panic theater, where every problem looks like World War II waiting to happen. So what do we do with this kind of rhetoric? On one hand, Graham is right that authoritarian powers like Russia, China, and Iran pose real challenges. On the other hand, treating every challenge like Hitler's rise risks blinding us to smarter, more flexible strategies. Fear may rally attention in the short term, but it can also drag nations into wars they might have avoided. And in this hearing, Graham wasn't just highlighting threats, he was daring the Pentagon to validate his worst fears, so he could argue that America must act now, or else face catastrophe. That's why the real question isn't whether Graham is wrong about the dangers, it's whether his version of urgency makes America safer, or simply more reckless. Are we actually learning from history, or are we just recycling its most terrifying chapters for another round of soundbites? Because if every threat is Hitler, and every rival is a ticking bomb, then we might be building policies on fear, not facts. And that could be just as dangerous as the enemies themselves. So what do you think? Is Graham offering a necessary wake-up call, or is he dragging the U.S. closer to endless wars by replaying the same script over and over? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe, because the next one is even more controversial.